She sold water to survive. He bought it to buy her time. But neither of them knew that one bottle would change their lives forever. The sun was merciless that afternoon, beating down on the cracked concrete of East Bridge University's basketball court. The crowd roared, the air thick with sweat and summer heat. Amid the sea of laughter and cheers, a single voice kept rising above the noise, soft, almost trembling, but determined. Water. Cold water. 2 yuan a bottle. Yin Xiaowen's voice carried across the court, but it wasn't loud enough to drown out the sneers. A few boys from the economics department laughed as she passed, the plastic crate of bottles cutting red marks into her palms. Hey, it's the water girl again, one called out. How much this time? Or do we get a discount if we compliment your smile? The group laughed. Xiaowen's lips curved. Not quite a smile, not quite defiance, just a calm acknowledgement that she'd heard it all before. She moved on. Her shirt clung to her back, damp with sweat, but her posture stayed straight. Every bottle she sold meant another notebook, another meal, another night she wouldn't have to choose between studying and sleeping hungry. She approached a group sitting near the edge of the court. Would you like water? They shook their heads, amused. No thanks. It's too expensive anyway. Her smile faltered for half a second, but she still bowed slightly and turned away. From the bleachers, someone had been watching her, a tall figure in a gray t-shirt, basketball in hand, his eyes following her every move. Shenhe. Everyone on campus knew him. The captain of the university basketball team. The boy who could charm professors with his grades and crowds with his grin. But today, his focus wasn't on the ball or the game. It was on the girl weaving between students, clutching bottles like they were her lifeline. She wasn't the prettiest girl on campus, but something about her struck him, her quiet resilience, the unshakable calm behind her tired eyes. When the whistle blew for a timeout, Shenhe tossed the ball to a teammate and jogged toward the stands. Hey, excuse me, can I get one? Xiaowen looked up, startled. Her hand went automatically to the crate, pulling out a cold bottle. 3 yuan. He arched a brow. 3? It's 2 in the supermarket. She lifted her chin. Then go to the supermarket. A faint grin touched his lips. But I'm thirsty now. Then it's 3 yuan, she said simply, holding out the bottle. Her tone wasn't sharp. It was practical, steady, like she'd had this argument before. Her determination only amused him more. Fine, he said, fishing in his pocket. How about I take them all? Her brows furrowed. All. He gestured to her crate. Yeah, everything you've got. A murmur rippled through the students nearby. Some giggled. Others looked confused. Buying out the water girl now, Captain, someone teased. But Shenhe ignored them, placing the bills neatly in her hand. Xiaowen hesitated. Why would you need this much water? Maybe I'm just really thirsty. Their eyes met. Hers skeptical, his unreadable. Something electric passed between them, fleeting but real. She looked away first. You're wasting money. He shrugged. Maybe, but at least you get to go home early. Her lips parted in surprise, and for the first time all day, her hands trembled slightly. She wasn't used to kindness. It confused her more than insults. Do you think I want to go home early? She asked quietly. Every hour I sell water is an hour I can pay for books. For next semester. The way she said it, without pity, without pride, hit something deep in him. Before he could respond, another voice cut through. Shenhe, stop flirting and get back in the game. He smiled faintly, nodding to his teammate. Then to her, he said, keep the change. I don't need charity. It's not charity, he replied smoothly. It's appreciation. The referee's whistle blew again. He turned to go, but her voice stopped in mid-step. Wait. He looked back. Her expression had hardened. Next time, she said, don't buy from me because you feel sorry. He froze for a heartbeat, the noise of the court fading behind him. Sorry, he repeated softly. Who said anything about sorry? She crossed her arms, the faintest trace of suspicion in her tone. People don't spend that kind of money unless they want to show off or feel pity. He took a slow step closer, enough for her to see the spark in his eyes. Half amusement, half challenge. Maybe I bought them because I wanted to see you smile, he said. Her breath caught, but she masked it quickly. That's not something you can buy either. A pause. A smile. Then, With a lazy confidence only he could pull off, he said, "Then maybe I'll buy your time." The words hung in the air between them, shimmering with something dangerous and new. Her eyes widened, but before she could answer, he turned away and jogged back to the court, the sunlight cutting a golden edge around his figure. From the bleachers, Xiaoan watched him for a moment, confused, curious, and for the first time in a long while, unable to look away. The rest of the afternoon moved in slow motion. The ball bounced, cheers erupted, but she barely heard them. All she could think about was that one line. "Buy your time." Who even said that? What did it mean? When the game ended, the players were surrounded by fans. Shinho was laughing, his teammates slapping him on the back. But for a brief second, his gaze flickered across the crowd, searching, and found her. She was leaving, her crate empty, her shadow stretching long under the dying light. Their eyes met across the distance, and though she said nothing, he could read it clearly. "Don't come closer." But curiosity had already taken root, and for someone like Shinho, curiosity was dangerous. It made him chase what he couldn't understand. That night, while the city drowned in neon lights and car horns, Yin Xiaoan counted her earnings at her small dorm desk. 58 yuan. Enough for a week's meals, maybe a used textbook if she bargained. She should have felt relief. Instead, her thoughts wandered to the boy with the easy smile and unshakable gaze. She told herself she'd never see him again. Boys like him didn't look twice at girls like her. But as she lay in bed, she couldn't shake the memory of his voice, smooth, teasing, sincere in a way that unnerved her. "Then I'll buy your time." A simple line, a dangerous promise. And though she didn't know it yet, that one sentence would change everything, turning a summer sale into a story of love, betrayal, and redemption. Because sometimes love doesn't begin with fireworks. It begins with a bottle of water and a man who refused to stop looking. Welcome my beautiful family and friends to my YouTube channel. Please click on subscribe, like, share, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now back to the story. Rain had cooled the summer heat, but the air still carried the scent of competition. The basketball court was slick with drizzle, and laughter echoed from the locker room where Shinho sat half-dressed, towel around his neck, scrolling through his phone. "Bro, what's with that face?" Junwei leaned against the locker, smirking. "You've been staring into space since the game. Don't tell me you're thinking about the water girl again." Shinho looked up, feigning indifference. "Her name's Yin Xiaoan." "Oh, you even know her name now." Junwei's grin widened. "Don't tell me the great Shinho, the guy who turned down 3 cheerleaders last semester, has finally met his match." Across the room, the rest of the team erupted into laughter. "Impossible. Shinho doesn't chase girls, girls chase him." "Exactly." Junwei folded his arms. "So let's make things interesting." He tossed a basketball into the air, spinning it on his fingertip. "I bet you can't make that girl fall for you in 3 days." The room fell silent for a beat. Shinho's brow arched. 3 days? Yeah. Junwei smirked. "You've got the looks, the charm, the wallet. Should be easy, right? Unless you're scared." A low hum of amusement spread through the locker room. "Scared?" Shinho chuckled, rising from the bench. "You really think she's hard to get?" "She's not like the others," another teammate said. "She's grounded. She doesn't care who you are." Junwei grinned wider. "So prove us wrong. Make her fall for you. 3 days. Dinner, a smile, maybe a little hand-holding. You win. We treat you to a month of free lunches. You lose." Shinho crossed his arms. "What's the catch?" "You have to call Junwei father for a week," someone laughed. The room exploded with cheers and whistles. Shinho smirked. "Fine. You got a deal." The next afternoon, he found her again. Same spot, same quiet persistence. She was crouched beside her crate of water bottles, scribbling in a notebook between customers. A few students passed, ignoring her. He approached casually, hands in pockets, trying to ignore how oddly nervous he felt. "Still 3 yuan a bottle?" he asked. She looked up, recognizing him instantly. Her expression didn't soften. "You again?" "Guilty." He offered a grin. "Thought I'd check if the prices dropped after the rain." "No discounts," she said flatly, standing to meet his gaze. Her tone was calm, but there was an edge to it, like she already knew he was up to something. Then maybe I'll just buy your time again, he teased. She didn't smile. I told you last time, my time isn't for sale. The directness in her voice caught him off guard. Most girls giggled or played along. She looked at him like she was measuring his soul and finding it lacking. Fine, he said. Then how about a meal instead? My treat. You must get tired of standing here all day. Her brows lifted slightly. A meal? What? He hesitated for half a beat before slipping back into his practice charm. Because I want to know the story behind the girl who makes water look more valuable than gold. She blinked, unimpressed. That's the worst line I've ever heard. He laughed. Maybe, but it got your attention. For a second, something like amusement flickered in her eyes, but it vanished quickly. You think this is a joke, she said quietly. Another game for the popular boys who have everything. Her words landed like stones. He opened his mouth to protest, but she cut him off. You don't understand people like me. You see a girl selling water and think she's desperate. But I'm not. I'm just trying to live. Around them, whispers started, students slowing down to watch, some even smirking, sensing a scene. Shinho felt heat rise to his face. Not anger, but something unfamiliar. Embarrassment. Wait, that's not what I... Save it. She stepped back, lifting her crate. If you're doing this because of a bet, tell your friends you already lost. He froze. What did you say? Her eyes met his, unflinching. Boys like you always make bets. I've heard it all before. Then she turned and walked away, the crowd parting around her like water. For a long moment, Shinho stood there, the laughter of his teammates echoing faintly from across the court. That night, the echo wouldn't leave his head. Day 2. He told himself he was just passing by. He wasn't. She was there again, hair tied back, hands red from lifting bottles. No makeup, no act. Just steady, quiet work. He watched from a distance until guilt got the better of him. Still working hard? He asked when he finally approached. She didn't even look up. If you're here for another joke, don't waste your time. I'm not joking. Then what do you want? He hesitated. To apologize. That made her pause. She glanced at him, eyes narrowing as if searching for sarcasm, but finding none. I didn't make any bet, he said softly. But maybe I did treat you like someone I could win over. That was wrong. For the first time, she seemed uncertain. Why are you saying this? Because, he said, you were right about one thing. I don't understand people like you. But I want to. She studied him for a long moment. Understanding someone takes more than words. He smiled faintly. Then give me a chance to show it. She shook her head. I don't need chances. I need honesty. With that, she turned again, leaving him standing in the drizzle, her words echoing louder than any applause he'd ever received on the court. By the third day, Junwei was waiting. Well, he asked during lunch, leaning across the table. Did she melt yet? Should we start calling you father? Shinho didn't answer. He was staring at his phone. No messages, no calls, nothing but the memory of her voice. Junwei laughed. You mean she actually turned you down? Bro, I told you, she's immune. The group erupted in laughter, but Shinho didn't join in. Instead, he stood up slowly, pushing his tray aside. You lost the bet, Junwei grinned. 3 days are up. Shinho met his gaze, something unreadable in his eyes. Maybe I did. Oh, come on, don't look so serious. It was just for fun. He gave a small, humorless laugh. Yeah, just for fun. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. Funny thing, though, he said over his shoulder, voice low and steady. She's the first girl who made me forget I was playing. The laughter died instantly. Junwei frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Shinho didn't answer. He just walked out into the afternoon light, the sound of bouncing basketballs echoing somewhere in the distance. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like the winner. And for the first time in his life, he didn't want to be. The first chill of autumn crept through the campus, painting the trees in shades of rust and gold. For most students, the season meant midterms and stress. But for Shinho and Yin Xiaoan, it meant something different. Quiet evenings under the library's yellow light, shared earbuds, and a kind of closeness that felt both fragile and faded. It had been weeks since the bet, the cruel game that brought them together. But now, there was no game left. Only long nights and unspoken words. Every evening, she would wait by the fountain near the dorms, her bag heavy with books and leftover sandwiches from her part-time job. And every night, he would show up, pretending it was coincidence. Eventually, neither of them bothered pretending. They studied side by side in the empty library, whispering answers under their breath. Sometimes, when she grew tired, he'd slide a cup of coffee toward her without a word. When he complained about complex finance formulas, she'd roll her eyes and patiently explain. It was easy, too easy. One night, when the rain drummed softly against the window, she broke the silence. You know, if you fail this exam, it won't be because you're not smart. It'll be because you keep looking at me instead of your notes. He smiled without denying it. You noticed? She shot him a look. You're not subtle. He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. Neither are you. Her cheeks flushed, and she buried her face in her notes. You're impossible. But when their eyes met again, laughter bubbled up between them. Pure, unguarded, real. That night, when they walked home through the drizzle, their shoulders brushed for the first time. He offered her his umbrella. She refused. We'll share, she said softly. Under that small canopy, the world shrank to the sound of rain and two beating hearts. Soon, their days began to blur into one another. Instant noodles at midnight, eaten straight from the pot. Movie nights that turned into quiet conversations about the future. Dreams whispered beneath flickering dorm lights. Hers filled with responsibility, his filled with freedom. She talked about paying off her father's debts, about wanting to open a small accounting firm someday. He talked about quitting basketball after graduation, maybe studying abroad. Abroad? She'd asked, a little surprised. Why? He had shrugged. Because I've spent too long being someone everyone else wants me to be. Maybe it's time I figure out who I am. She smiled faintly. You sound like you're running away. Maybe I am, he admitted. But what about you? Her smile faded. People like me don't run away. We just keep going. He wanted to tell her that she didn't have to keep going alone, that she could rest, that he'd help her. But every time he tried, the words stuck in his throat. Because somewhere deep down, he knew she wouldn't let him. Winter came early that year. One morning, she didn't show up for class. Then another, and another. At first, he thought she might be sick. But when he called, her number was disconnected. He searched the campus, her dorm, the library, the cafeteria. No one had seen her. It was as if she had vanished overnight. Finally, her roommate told him the truth. Her father had collapsed, heart failure. The debts he'd been hiding had finally caught up with him. Without a word, Xiaoan had taken the first train back to her hometown. Shenho stood frozen in the hallway, her roommate's words echoing in his mind. She said she might not come back. The weeks that followed were a blur. He sent messages that went unanswered. He called, but the line stayed dead. And every night, he sat on the same bench by the fountain, waiting. Snow began to fall, soft, silent, merciless. Then, one afternoon, when the world was wrapped in gray, he saw her. She stood at the edge of the court, wearing the same old jacket, her hands tucked into her pockets. But something had changed. Her shoulders were straighter, her eyes duller. Xiaoan. She looked up at the sound of his voice. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Relief, maybe. Then it was gone. You came back, he said. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't think it mattered, she replied. Her voice was soft, almost detached. He frowned. Of course it matters. I was worried. I know. She cut him off. But worry doesn't change anything. He stared at her, unable to recognize the girl he used to laugh with. What happened? My father's better, she said mechanically. But the hospital bills. I had to take extra shifts. The scholarship barely covers anything. He reached for her hand. Then let me help. You don't have to do this alone. She pulled away. You don't understand. I do, he insisted. You're struggling and struggling. Her voice cracked, sharp enough to draw eyes from nearby students. You think this is about struggle? You live in a world where problems disappear if you throw money at them. I don't. The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Then let me use that world for you, he said quietly. Just this once. But she only shook her head. And what happens after? When you get bored? When your friends laugh about the water girl who thought she could fit into your world, you step closer, desperate now. Xiaoan. No, she took a step back, her eyes glistening. You don't see it, do you? We're too different. You come from light. I come from the dark. And no matter how much I try, I'll never shine like you. The wind blew through the court, carrying away the sound of the whistle, the laughter, the crowd. For a moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the world. He wanted to say something, anything, but her expression silenced him. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile people wear before breaking. You taught me how to dream again, Shenhe. But dreams don't pay debts. Reality does. And then, softly, almost like a confession, she whispered the words that would stay with him for years. I don't belong in your world, Shenhe. And you were never really in mine. Before he could speak, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the falling snow, her footprints fading behind her. He didn't call out, didn't chase her, because deep down, he knew some distances can't be crossed by love alone. And as the snow swallowed her shadow, Shenhe finally realized that sometimes love doesn't end with anger. Sometimes it just ends with silence. The rain returned in March, soft but relentless, soaking through the stone walkways of East Bridge University. Students hurried past under umbrellas, laughing, shouting, alive in a way neither Yin Xiaoan nor Shenhe felt anymore. They hadn't been the same since she came back. The warmth that once tied them together now trembled under the weight of silence. He still waited for her after class. She still let him walk her home. But between their steps, an invisible distance had grown, a fragile, aching quiet filled with everything they weren't saying. It began small, with an envelope. He left on her desk one morning, plain, white sealed. No note, just her name written neatly across the front. When she opened it, her hands froze. Inside was a stack of bills, enough to pay off 2 months of rent, maybe more. Her breath caught, then her eyes hardened. That evening, she found him in the courtyard, tossing pebbles into the fountain. You shouldn't have done that, she said, her voice calm but sharp. He turned, his smile uncertain. I just wanted to help. Help. She held up the envelope like it was something dirty. You think I need your charity? It's not charity, Xiaoan. It's love. She flinched, as if the word itself cut her. Love doesn't make you my sponsor, Shenhe. He sighed, stepping closer. I wasn't trying to insult you. You're working 3 jobs. You barely sleep. I'm surviving, she snapped. That's what people like me do. Her tone was so controlled, so painfully steady, that he didn't notice the tremor in her hands until the envelope fell, scattering bills into the wet grass. The wind caught them, sending them spinning like broken feathers. Xiaoan, please. Do you even hear yourself? She said, her voice cracking. Every time you try to save me, you remind me that I'm someone who needs saving, that I'm not your equal. You are my equal. Then why do you keep treating me like a problem to fix? The rain fell harder. He reached for her wrist, but she pulled back, eyes shining with something fierce, hurt, pride, maybe both. You think money can make us even, she whispered, but it only makes me smaller. The next day, they met again, this time by accident, in front of the economics hall. Students gathered nearby, chatting about projects, laughter spilling through the damp air. He approached carefully, hoping the night's storm had washed away her anger. Can we talk? He asked. She hesitated. There's nothing left to say. There's everything left to say. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small umbrella, holding it over her head. At least let me. She pushed it away. Stop. You don't have to protect me from the rain either. Something in him snapped then, not out of hate but helplessness. Why do you always twist what I do? He said, louder than he meant to. Why does everything I say become an insult? I'm trying, Xiaoan. I'm trying to make this work. The nearby students fell silent, heads turning. She stiffened under their stares. Then stop shouting, she said quietly. I'm not shouting. Yes, you are. Her voice trembled. And you're doing it in front of everyone. He looked around. The watching eyes, the murmurs, the judgment. For the first time, he realized how they must see it. The rich boy arguing with the water girl who once sold bottles outside this very building. Pity in some eyes. Amusement in others. and in hers, disappointment. "Do you know what hurts the most?" she said, her tone breaking like glass. "It's that you don't even realize how much power you have. You raise your voice, and everyone listens. I raise mine, and I'm dramatic. That's what your world looks like." He tried to speak, but she was already turning away. "Xiao, wait." She stopped, her back to him. The rain had soaked through her clothes, her hair clinging to her neck. "I thought love could make us equals," she said softly. "But maybe love only works when both people live in the same sky." And then she walked away, slowly, steadily, without once looking back. He stood there, drenched and speechless, the world spinning around him. The crowd began to move again, whispers trailing like ghosts. One of the students laughed. "Guess the fairy tale's over." He didn't respond. Later that night, he found himself wandering through the empty campus, his sneakers squelching through puddles. The streetlights flickered weakly, their reflections trembling in the water. He thought about calling her, apologizing, explaining, begging, but he knew she wouldn't pick up. So he walked, hoping the rain would do what words couldn't, wash away the ache in his chest. When he reached the same fountain where they had first shared an umbrella months ago, he sat down, burying his face in his hands. His fingers brushed something in his jacket pocket, a small velvet box. He pulled it out, staring at it through the rain-blurred light. Inside, nestled in soft blue fabric, was a simple silver ring. Not expensive, not flashy, just something he thought she'd like. Something that said forever without needing to shout it. He had planned to give it to her tonight. He had planned to tell her that her pride didn't scare him, that her independence was the reason he loved her. He had planned to ask her to stay. Now, all he could do was laugh, a hollow, trembling sound swallowed by the storm. Back at the dorm, he left the ring on his desk, the velvet darkened by raindrops. He tried to study, to sleep, to do anything but think. But the imagery played again and again, her turning away, her voice breaking as she said goodbye without using the word. Maybe love only works when both people live in the same sky. The line carved into him like a wound. And when he closed his eyes, he could still see her, walking away through the rain, shoulders straight, dignity unbroken. He wanted to hate her for leaving. He wanted to hate himself for letting her. Instead, he just sat there in the silence, his heart heavy with all the things he hadn't said. On the table, the ring glinted faintly under the lamplight, proof of a promise never spoken and never kept. The next morning, the janitor sweeping the courtyard found something small and forgotten in the mud near the fountain. A black velvet box, its lid slightly open. Inside, a ring catching the first light of dawn. He picked it up, brushed off the dirt, and placed it on the bench nearby, unaware that it had once held a future that slipped quietly away in the rain. The city looked different at night, colder, taller, crueler. Neon lights bled into the puddles along the street, and the wind carried the scent of rain and exhaust. In a black car gliding through downtown, Shinho sat in silence. The driver said nothing. Everyone knew better than to speak when he wore that look. 5 years. 5 years since the girl with the steady eyes and water-stained hands walked out of his life. He had become everything he once said he didn't want to be, ruthless, polished, untouchable. The youngest CEO in his company's history. The man the press called the cold prodigy of Eastbridge finance. Every deal closed. Every empire expanded. But somewhere between all the victories, something inside him had gone quiet. He had learned to replace feelings with figures, smiles with signatures. And whenever someone asked about love, he'd say, "It's a distraction." But on nights like this, when success echoed too loudly in empty penthouses, he'd catch himself wondering if she'd ever forgiven him. He never called, never looked for her, because he was afraid of what he might find, that she had forgotten him. That night, a client insisted on celebrating at Blue Moon, the city's most exclusive bar, where deals were signed over whiskey and people sold more than just drinks. The place gleamed like a secret. Marble floors, chandeliers dripping with crystal, and a piano playing a slow, smoky tune that didn't belong to any particular time. Shinho entered with his usual composure, dark suit, darker eyes. The hostess smiled, bowing deeply. "Welcome back, Mr. Shun," she said. "Your table is ready." He nodded. "Make it quick. I have a flight at midnight." As he crossed the room, laughter swelled and dimmed like waves. But beneath the chatter, he heard something else, a familiar voice. Soft, low, unmistakable. He turned, and the world stopped. At the far end of the bar, carrying a tray of glasses, stood Yin Xiaoan. Her hair was tied back neatly, a few loose strands framing her face. Her uniform was simple, black and white, but she wore it with quiet dignity. For a moment, Shenhe forgot to breathe. The years melted away, the rain, the fights, the broken promises. It was all there in the curve of her shoulders, in the calm steadiness of her gaze as she leaned to serve a drink. She hadn't seen him yet, or maybe she had, and was pretending not to. His client was talking, something about quarterly margins, a new contract, but he couldn't hear a word. Every sound blurred except the faint clink of her tray as she turned, moving closer. Then her eyes met his. It was like the first time all over again. Only this time she didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't speak. She just looked at him, a stillness in her gaze that burned hotter than anger. And then she looked away. "Mr. Shun," the client's voice snapped him back. "You seem distracted." Shenhe forced a smile, cold and perfect. "Just the lighting. It's brighter than I expected." He excused himself and stood, his footsteps silent as he crossed the polished floor. When she turned toward the bar counter, he was already there, his reflection appearing beside hers in the mirror behind the rows of bottles. For a moment, neither spoke. The bartender glanced nervously between them, sensing something heavy in the air, then slipped away. Finally, she said quietly, "Good evening, sir. What can I get you?" He almost laughed, the polite, practiced tone, as if they were strangers. "You tell me," he said softly. "What do people usually order when they see ghosts?" She froze, her hand tightening around a glass. Then, without meeting his eyes, she murmured, "We don't serve those here." He studied her reflection in the mirror, the faint tiredness around her eyes, the way her lips pressed together just before she spoke. "You're working here?" he asked, his voice lower now. "At Blue Moon." She shrugged. "Work is work. You have a degree in finance. You were top of your class. I also had bills to pay," she said simply. Her tone wasn't bitter, just factual, the same quiet strength that used to both humble and terrify him. He wanted to ask everything, where she went, what happened, why she never called, but the words tangled in his throat. Instead, he said the one thing he shouldn't have. "I could help you." Her gaze snapped to his. "Don't start that again. It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," she said sharply. 5 years, and the first thing you offer me is help, like I'm still that girl selling water outside your court." The music softened, the piano melting into silence. Shenhe exhaled. "Then tell me what you want me to say." She met his eyes fully now. No fear, no hesitation, just a calm defiance that made his chest ache. "Say nothing," she whispered. "You've already said enough in the past." Her tray clinked as she set it down. She turned to leave, but he reached out, his hand brushing her arm. Not forceful, just a desperate plea for one more second. "Xiaoan," his voice cracked, barely audible. She stopped. He swallowed hard. "What are you doing here?" Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't face him. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost gentle, but soaked in something heavier than bitterness. "Earning my water money, again." She walked away before he could respond, her footsteps swallowed by the bar's low hum. He stood there, hands still half raised, heart pounding in a rhythm he hadn't felt in years. From his table, he watched her for the rest of the night, the way she moved through the room like she belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. The way men smiled at her, thinking she was invisible beyond her service. Each smile, each gesture, twisted something inside him tighter. He wanted to stand up, drag her out of that place, demand to know why she'd chosen this life. But he didn't, because now he understood she didn't need saving. Not anymore, and maybe she never had. When the clock struck midnight, he stood to leave. His client was drunk, laughing, unaware of the storm behind Shenhe's eyes. He glanced toward the bar one last time. She was gone. Only her tray remained, balanced perfectly on the counter, the same way she had left before, quietly, completely, leaving him with nothing but memories and the hollow sound of his own regret. Outside, the city lights blurred against the drizzle. He climbed into his car, loosening his tie, the echo of her voice still haunting him. "Earning my water money, again." The words played over and over as the car disappeared into the night. A cruel reminder that some ghosts don't haunt places. They haunt people. The headlines called him the unshakable CEO. But for the first time in years, Shinho couldn't focus. Since that night at Blue Moon, his meetings blurred, his temper shortened, and his thoughts betrayed him every time he closed his eyes. He'd built his empire on discipline. Every number precise, every decision calculated. But now, every decision began and ended with her. Yin Xiaoan, the girl who used to sell water and smile at the sun, now serving drinks in a bar that smelled of perfume and secrets. She had looked right through him that night, as if the years between them had carved a wall no fortune could break. And yet, he couldn't stop watching her, couldn't stop remembering how her eyes had once softened when she said his name. Rumors began to spread through the boardroom like wildfire. Shinho's distracted. They whispered, "He's slipping." One morning, his assistant entered cautiously, placing a tabloid on the desk. The headline hit him like a slap. "Billionaire CEO seen at Blue Moon. Late nights or secret affair?" He didn't read the rest. He didn't need to. He already knew how the world twisted things it didn't understand. He called his PR team. Bury it. Immediately. But damage, he knew, wasn't always measured in headlines. Sometimes it whispered. It waited. It smelled opportunity. That same afternoon, he received an invitation, embossed, discreet, bearing no name. A meeting request. From Mr. K. Everyone in the industry knew of him. The ghost investor who bought companies, gutted them, and disappeared. A man who could turn reputations to dust with a single handshake. Shinho wasn't interested until he read the line at the bottom. Proposal, acquisition of the Blue Moon chain. His jaw tightened. Blue Moon. It wasn't just the bar she worked in. It was her employer's entire network, a growing chain that had become a thorn in Shinho's corporate side. Destroying it would mean reclaiming dominance in the city's entertainment sector. Accepting the deal would double his company's valuation and ruin her. He sat in silence for a long time, the invitation heavy in his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. Set the meeting. The following evening, Blue Moon pulsed with low music and velvet shadows. Yin Xiaoan moved through the haze like she belonged to it. Calm, graceful, unreachable. She didn't notice the man in the corner booth watching her every move. When one of the regulars leaned too close, she smiled politely and stepped back, her professionalism unshaken. But something in Shinho twisted. Jealousy, hot and sharp, flickered beneath his composure. He had no right. She wasn't his. Not anymore. Still, when that same man's hand brushed her wrist, Shinho's chair scraped against the marble floor. Before anyone could blink, he was beside her. She said, "She's fine," he said coldly, his voice slicing through the room. The man, flushed with liquor, sneered. "Who are you?" "Her bodyguard." Shinho's stare was enough to freeze him. Something like that. The bartender hurried over, murmuring apologies, ushering the drunk away. But the damage was done. The entire bar had gone quiet, every eye following the powerful man standing too close to the woman who pretended not to know him. Xiaoan's voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she spoke. "You shouldn't be here." He met her eyes. "You shouldn't let people treat you like that." Her laugh was bitter, tired. "You think I have a choice? This is survival, Shinho, not pride." His name, sounded strange in her mouth after so many years. He wanted to say something, to explain, to tell her about the deal he hadn't yet accepted. But she was already walking away. The next morning, Mr. K arrived. The meeting was held in a private suite overlooking the city. Glass walls, gold fixtures, and a silence that reeked of money. Mr. K was older than Shinho expected. His smile was soft, but his eyes were knives. "Mr. Shan," he said smoothly, You and I both know emotion is the most expensive mistake a businessman can make. Shinho didn't reply. Mr. K slid a file across the table. The Blue Moon Group is drowning in debt. If you back my acquisition, we both win. You gain control of their venues. I handle the cleanup. Shinho's gaze flickered to the photos inside the file. The logo, the ledgers, the debt, and then at the very end, a staff list. His breath caught. Yin Xiaoan, shift manager, Blue Moon Central. He closed the file. What happens to the staff? He asked quietly. Mr. K's smile didn't falter. They'll find new lives. Or they won't. It's not our concern. Silence stretched between them. You're hesitating, Mr. K said. Is it because of a girl? Shinho's jaw tightened. I don't mix business with the past. Good, the older man said. Because the past has a way of killing the future. He left the file on the table. Call me when you've made up your mind. That night, Shinho couldn't sleep. He poured whiskey into a glass, staring out over the glittering skyline. He told himself this was business. Logic. Survival. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, laughing softly in the library, standing in the rain, walking away under neon light. When dawn crept through the window, he made his decision. He would protect her, quietly, anonymously, even if it meant defying the kind of men who never forgave betrayal. But the past had already moved faster than him. The next evening, as Blue Moon prepared to close, Xiaoan stepped out into the alley behind the bar, rubbing her sore wrists. She didn't hear the footsteps until it was too late. Two men in black waited by the dumpsters. The kind who didn't drink here, didn't laugh here, didn't belong here. Yi and Xiaoan? One asked. Before she could answer, the blow came, fast, hard, meant to warn, not to kill. Her knees hit the wet pavement, pain exploding through her ribs. This is a message, one of them hissed. Tell your boss to stay out of Mr. K's way. And then they were gone, swallowed by the night. When Shinho's car screeched to a stop minutes later, called by a trembling bartender, he found her curled against the wall, blood staining her sleeve. For a moment, he couldn't move. Then instinct took over. Xiaoan, he breathed, kneeling beside her, his hands shaking as he lifted her into his arms. Stay with me, please. Her eyes fluttered open, dazed but defiant. You shouldn't have come. Don't talk. You're safe now. She gave a weak laugh that broke his heart. Safe? Around you? He didn't answer, just carried her toward the car, the city lights flashing across her pale face. As the door closed, she gripped his collar weakly, her blood smearing the fabric. I told you, she whispered, her voice fading like smoke. Your world will destroy me. The engine roared to life, and the car vanished into the storm, carrying with it the past he could never bury, and the woman he might lose all over again. Morning crept slowly into the city, pale lights spilling between the blinds, softening the steel edges of skyscrapers. The storm had passed, leaving everything washed and quiet. In the private wing of St. Clair's Hospital, the world smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain. Machines hummed softly beside a bed where Yin Xiaoan lay sleeping, her face pale but peaceful, the bruises on her arm fading under the light. For the first time in days, there was no pain, no shouting, no fear. Only stillness. She stirred, blinking against the brightness. The ceiling came into focus first, then the window, then the sound of steady breathing, not her own. He was there, sitting beside her bed, elbows on his knees, dark circles under his eyes. Shinho looked nothing like the man who once ruled boardrooms with icy precision. His suit jacket was folded over the chair. His tie was gone. The first few buttons of his shirt were open, his sleeves rolled, and his hand was still wrapped around hers, like he hadn't let go even once. For a long time, she just watched him. He looked tired, not the kind of tired money could fix, but the kind that came from losing more than one could bear. She tried to speak, but her throat burned. How long have I been here? His head lifted instantly, eyes sharp, relief flooding his expression. You're awake. She managed a weak smile. Barely. 2 days, he said softly. You scared me. I scare you, she whispered, voice trembling with faint humor. That's new. He didn't laugh. Instead, he exhaled, looking down at their joined hands. You lost a lot of blood. The doctor said if you'd been found 10 minutes later. He stopped, unable to finish. His voice cracked for the first time since she'd known him. She squeezed his hand gently. But I wasn't, she said. I'm still here. He looked at her then, really looked. And for a heartbeat, the man who'd built empires and crushed rivals looked utterly, beautifully human. Later, when the nurse came to check her vitals, Xiaoan noticed the details she hadn't seen before. The flowers on the table, fresh, not sent by anyone, handpicked. The bills stacked neatly on the counter, every one of them signed by him. And beside her bed, a small paper cup with instant coffee, half drunk and cold. "You've been here the whole time?" she asked once the nurse left. He nodded. "I didn't want you waking up alone." "Your company?" I resigned. The words hit her like a gust of cold wind. "You what?" "I walked away," he said simply. "Mr. K, the investors, the press, they can have it all. I'm done." She blinked at him, disbelieving. "You left everything for me." His gaze was steady. "For us." She shook her head, voice trembling. "You're out of your mind." He smiled faintly. "Probably. But for once it feels right." The silence that followed wasn't awkward this time. It was heavy, full of everything they'd been too proud to say years ago. Finally, she whispered, "You shouldn't have done that. I don't want you to lose everything because of me." "I didn't lose anything," he said quietly. "I just stopped pretending the rest of it mattered." She looked away, eyes glistening. "You always did things your way." "Not always," he said. "When I lost you, it was because I tried to control everything. I thought love meant fixing your world until it looked like mine. I didn't realize all you wanted was someone to stand beside you, not above you." She turned to him, startled by the raw honesty in his voice. "Shenho." He reached for her hand again, his thumb brushing lightly over her scarred knuckles. "You once told me I could never understand your world. You were right. But that night, when they hurt you, I finally saw it. The world you live in isn't small. It's brave. It's real. And I was too blind to see it before." Her breath hitched, a tear slipping free before she could stop it. "Why now?" He smiled, weary but certain. "Because redemption always comes too late. But love doesn't have to." The morning sun grew brighter, spilling over the bed like liquid gold. Outside, the city hummed to life. Cars moving, people running, life resuming. But inside that small hospital room, time seemed to pause. For years, they had lived in opposite worlds, one built on wealth, the other on struggle. But now, stripped of everything, they were finally equals. She studied him quietly. The man before her was no longer the confident, unshakable CEO. He was just Shinho, the boy who once bought all her water under the blazing sun, who smiled like the world wasn't big enough to contain his heart. And maybe that was the version she'd been waiting for all along. "You shouldn't look at me like that," she said softly. "How am I looking at you? Like you're still trying to buy something that's not for sale." He chuckled under his breath. "Then maybe I need to change my offer." She tilted her head. "To what?" He leaned closer, his voice low, steady, full of something gentle and certain. "Not buying," he said, "just staying." Tears blurred her vision again, but this time she didn't hide them. She let them fall, for the years lost, for the fights, for the pride that had kept them apart. He brushed them away with his thumb, his hand trembling slightly. "You once told me I didn't belong in your world," he murmured, "but I think I finally found a way in." "And what world is that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled. "Yours." For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the quiet rhythm of the heart monitor, steady and sure. Outside, the sun climbed higher, painting the skyline in light. The darkness that had haunted them both was gone. Not erased, but transformed into something softer, something that could finally be forgiven. She looked at him again, her lips curving into the faintest, trembling smile. "You once bought all my water," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Now you've spent everything on me again." His eyes softened. This time he said, "I'm not buying." A pause, the kind that holds 1,000 unsaid words. Then he added quietly, "I'm staying." And for the first time in years, she believed him. Because love wasn't about saving or sacrificing. It was about surviving together. It was about the boy who sold pride for forgiveness, and the girl who finally learned to let him. Outside the hospital, the sky cleared completely, a dawn too bright to look at directly. And somewhere within that golden light, two souls found each other again, not as broken halves, but as something whole, rebuilt from the ashes of pride, reborn in the quiet truth of forgiveness. As the monitor beeped softly beside her, Shinho leaned back in his chair, still holding her hand, and for the first time in a long time he smiled. Not the smile of a man who had everything, but of one who had finally learned what everything truly meant. If the person who once broke your heart returned, not with promises, but with change, would you forgive them? Thank you for watching this story to the end. Please click subscribe, like, and share this video. Click on the screen to watch the next one.